Hello, this is Dr. Nancy Kuntz. I'm a child neurologist at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago at Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. I'm here today with some colleagues to discuss clinical considerations for selecting a Duchenne muscular dystrophy therapy.
It's a pleasure to talk with you today, Nancy. I'm Sam McKenzie. I'm a pediatric neuromuscular disease specialist at the University of Rochester.
Hello, good morning. It's great to be with you all. I'm Caitlin Batley. I'm a pediatric neuromuscular neurologist at UT Southwestern in Children's Health in Dallas, Texas.
I know that there's a lot of discussion that has happened with not a lot of practical experience or early data to support it, debating the issue of how old a child should be before gene therapy is given, not just because of issues of side effect, but because we do not yet know exactly how long the duration of the impact would be. And since we're still in a situation where there is ongoing degeneration and regeneration and use of satellite cells, a concern about possibly limiting the impact of the new gene or the transgene in generations of repaired muscles over time. Dr. McKenzie, what are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, my thoughts are, again, going back to those conversations with families and admitting where we don't have strong evidence in terms of long-term efficacy. We're in a state where, the longest out people have been with delandistrogene moxeparvovec is only a matter of years still. So we don't know decades out the durability of effect of that particular gene therapy. And as you mentioned, biologically speaking, this is a episomal transcript that means it doesn't integrate with DNA. So if we're thinking about muscle degeneration and regeneration through those satellite cells, that transgene doesn't really have a chance to last, decades and decades, we would think. Obviously, time will tell. So I think it comes down to setting those expectations and acknowledging those unknowns with the family, because it is a very big undertaking with potential adverse effects. So it's one of those things that I think we're going to learn more as time goes on. But it's certainly a great option to have.
And I think that families are asking me questions about what about redosing, if the impact or efficacy of the gene replacement or the microgene replacement wanes over time. Will there be the option for redosing? And I think that's very closely related to the question of, will there be options for gene therapy in individuals who have antibodies against the vector? What are your thoughts on that, Caitlin?
Yeah, those are really exciting topics. So as far as redosing, I think that is one of the big unknowns that we are all kind of trying to figure out and grapple with at this point. I think that with the concerns about durability, we all hope that there could be the potential for redosing, but I don't think we're quite, we have all of that quite figured out. As far as the opportunity to provide this therapy to an individual who already has pre-existing antibodies, my hope is that we're getting closer to being able to do that with some really exciting clinical trials that are going on right now, looking at different strategies for how we can get this done, which I think will provide a really great opportunity for those families who may have gotten the disappointing news that they're not currently eligible for this treatment. So really excited for what hopefully near future will bring.
And that brings me to one last topic that I would like to get both of your thoughts about, and that is the issue of, I know you're both involved in clinical treatment trials, and if you have a child who might be eligible for an approved therapy, say an approved gene replacement for microdystrophin, but that there are also clinical treatment trials with new types available. What is your discussion with the family? How do you guide families to make a decision between an approved therapy and a clinical treatment trial?
That's another wonderful question. Yeah, so it's a challenge, and I'm going to stick with my original answer that it comes down to a family by family, patient by patient basis. And I think it's really comes down to figuring out what the risk-benefit calculus is for a given family. Certainly, there's appeal in accepting treatment with a commercially approved product if we're thinking about gene therapy. But I can say that there's also probably appeal at looking at some of these alternatives in the market that are in clinical trials, which might use a lower dose of AAV and might come with it a lower side effect profile. They might have better transmittal of that transgene into the target cells, being muscle and heart as our priorities. We don't know. That's why we do clinical trials. But I think it is important to acknowledge, because these things can get conflated, that we have clinical trials because we need to do the research. And this is not the same as a commercially approved treatment. So as long as you can have that conversation honestly, I think parents appreciate that. And they appreciate being given the option of here's what's commercially approved and here's what's out there on a more experimental research basis.
Yeah, and so I think the availability of additional therapies through clinical trials also allows us to potentially reach some patients who may have been ineligible for therapies that are commercially approved. And so, I think that using different viral vectors with the potential that you could treat someone who was antibody positive for one, but might be negative for another, really provides just a great opportunity to offer therapies to patients who might have been ineligible for those that are commercially available. But I agree with Dr. McKenzie. It is a very detailed discussion. There are some families who might feel that they would rather have an FDA approved therapy, and others who might be interested in potentially trying something that's new that might be using a different transgene with, different components of their microdystrophin, with the potential for it to maybe have increased efficacy, but also acknowledging that because it is an investigational therapy, something like that is not guaranteed, and they're kind of a little bit more in an unknown outcomes. So it's wonderful to have the opportunities to provide many different options to our families.
Absolutely. And I feel a need to point out that between the different approaches to gene therapy right now, one of the other differences between the different transgenes and the different vectors is a different approach to immunomodulation, that some of them are limited to additional steroid therapy and others are more elaborate. And all of these things are things that we don't have answers for quite yet. I want to thank the two of you for allowing me to put you on the hot seat and ask you questions for which there really are no answers, and that we knew it all from the beginning. But I think that to have this discussion for clinicians who are beginning to have these discussions with their family, and to know that experienced clinical trialists are still being very humble and recognizing that we don't yet have the answers, I hope that's very helpful to them.